Good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Soñ Gweha, and some of you are invited personally or collectively to take part in this discussion, this moment, this gathering, that centers community organizers, artists, activists, the colonial and trainers, and storm workers, really. And it's called Living in the Storm, Embodying the Storm. And we will tell you more about it. It is a panel discussion, but more of all, it is also a group discussion. So there will be access to mics so that you can also take part in this discussion. But before we start, and we start introducing ourselves, I think this is important for you to understand what is happening now and to put a little bit more of context of where we are and what is happening in this moment for us.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Hello? Yeah, it does work. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for opening the space. To open the space, we had the chance to come together and speak with each other and share with each other. And I thank you for bringing us together in this beautiful, meaningful way. So we want to matter the space in which we are. And if you step out of this building and just turn to the right, is it right? Yes. To the right, just a few buildings, is the Ministry for Interior Affairs. And in front of this ministry in 1999, the Network of African Communities organized a wakekeeping. And this wakekeeping was organized when the community was already in motion. We were protesting against something that mainstream society deemed not to exist, and that is institutional racism. And in front of the ministry, we did a wakekeeping for Marcus Umufuma, who was a young Nigerian who was killed while being deported from Austria. Now, we were invited to bring things to the space that are meaningful for us. So we collectively brought candles, because this was a means for us to keep wake. We used the candles that you find here in Austrian supermarkets for graves, because they're resistant to the weather. And then we also brought roses, because roses are very forgiving to harsh conditions. So we had roses and candles. So we want to matter that space. And another thing that I wanted to also matter is the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is also that here we are in Kunstraum Niederoesterreich. And there's also a statement from Kunstraum Niederoesterreich. But I also wanted to matter that currently the government of Niederösterreich is in coalition with the far-right FPÖ. So I just wanted to matter that as well. There have been letters of protest from artists, so there's different levels that needed to be mattered. So I wanted to name the elephant in the room. It's much bigger than it is, but it's a symbol for that. Yes.
In having the opportunity to co-create this space here on an invitation by Friederike Sperling and the Kunstraum Niederoesterreich, with A Quiet Storm Blowing, it was very important for me, and I guess for the souls that inspires this work that I've been doing for 7 years, or maybe more. It was important to be in the collective, to activate this blowing element, this breathing, and doing that by being in a gathering during these offerings made sense. So by inviting KitchenSProsper, who is a Swiss collective, Afro-feminist collective that works on and around and with somatics and ways to create different types of healing moments and ongoing ones, hopefully. It was important for me to have you here because we've been collaborating for the last 2 years. It was also important for me to have Nandi here, who was one of the most influential person I know. Oh, okay, statement. Okay, statement. Wow. That was spontaneous. But really what I wanted to say is like a person who had an impact in my life since me coming to Vienna. But, through that, they're also the most influential person. I mean, voilà. Don't be jealous, I mean. And the way they've been impacted me is through their work as a transdisciplinary artist who works in cinema, image making, illustration, community organizing through their Space V-Day, where we had the best crepe party ever, so it was 2-3 years ago or something. And also through their work as an Ayurvedic wellness practitioner. And I saw when they started working in that field, and so to now having been able to invite you as well for this workshop that we had a few hours ago with KitchenSProsper. To see you share your knowledge was amazing. So thank you also, Nandi, for being here. The colonial joy. And it wouldn't be right also to create this discussion with community organizers and artists and researchers and slashers, really. Here in Vienna, and also connecting to where I move, really. Without inviting Araba, this wouldn't make any sense to me. I met Araba actually 3 weeks ago, and there are some meetings that where I'm not planned, it's the way it's supposed to happen. And so it was made to happen for me to be at Oira's workshop 3 weeks ago. And so we had a beautiful workshop, and Araba was there, and Araba said, "Hey, my name is Araba, what's your name?" And she told me everything about what her name means. And after that, thanks to Marisa, I was made aware of the work that Araba has been doing for years here in Vienna, but also outside Vienna, and how of a trailblazer, I guess. Is that a word, trailblazer? Yes. It's a word, no? Yeah. Okay. A trailblazer. How much of a trailblazer she is in this community, in this space, but also outside of it. And since then, we've been able to meet a few times, and it's those moments that I hold near and dear to my heart. I like to think of these invitations and this moment of gathering as moment where affinities can grow, where I claim friendship. So you're my friend. C'est bon en fait. Don't question it. Accept it. I mean. Donc, so I would like for this discussion to be a moment where everybody can tell a little bit about themselves, because this is a circle. It started as a circle, and when thinking of living in the storm, embodying the storm, I started with the understanding of what is a quiet storm that blows. To me, I'm talking here about communities, lineages, ancestralities, ancestors really, working through us, working with us, in our daily life, just going here and there, but also resisting when necessary, I guess. It's an ongoing journey. And so it's the life force. So there's the living storm, the one that you can stand outside of and you can see from outside, and where you can, it makes you feel disempowered, really, right? These oppressive forces that really feel like makes you think that you don't have any agency. But then I'm more interested in how we can embody the storm, but define it through our lens, through our knowledges, our practices, our memories, our textures, our gestures, our words, our language and vernacular, and our affinities, really, our way to be in togetherness, to be in friendships, be in conflict too. So it made sense for me to then, and for us in preparing this discussion, to understand that this discussion is just, it is by being there. So it is a moment to retell maybe our own experiences, our own work, our own practices, because this anti-erotic society make us believe that amnesia should be the way. And so I think it is important to be in remembrance as we are in the future now. So I'm just going to open the floor for who wants to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their work, perhaps how, what brought you here, and also, whenever it feels right, we're gonna open the mics also to be in discussion with one another. Is that okay? Cool, thank you.
Hey, my name is Tanya Radzwa Muyo. I'm part. Yeah. Hello. Oh. Hey, my name is Tanya Radzwa Muyo. I'm part of the collective KitchenSProsper, and we hail from Switzerland, Schweiz. We've been working on our project of the name of Careology for the past 3 years. And our goal really was in response to the context of COVID, the context of violence that we were experiencing as racialized people. Not only were we experiencing ongoing police violence, but also a feeling of powerlessness and disconnection. And we felt like it was so important for us to create transient caring spaces for racialized folks, particularly of queer ancestralities. But mostly for us, we felt like it was important because it never had existed before. I think it's important for us to say that living in Switzerland as racialized people is also living in a state where we are dispossessed of space, really, of spaces to be able to create with one another. And so for the most part, a lot of the spaces in which we are invited in are not spaces where we can actually anchor. So we felt like it was so important for us to create a laboratory where we could think about how we wanted to care for one another, but where we could also activate the cultures of care that we had inherited. And I think the first time we realized that it was super important is that we were seeing that, you know, during the COVID, the pandemic, we were all blocked in our homes, and I kept on seeing everywhere, self-care, self-care, we have to self-care. And I just really didn't understand what that meant and for whom that conversation was for. Who could afford to care? And what happened, maybe, let's just say, a couple months after that, I remember it was the feminist strike. It's on the 14th of June. It's the day of my birthday. By the way, I'm a Gemini. It was the 14th of June, and we were out here marching with a lot of... We love y'all, though. We love y'all. We are the human. Anyway, so we were walking, marching with a lot of white feminists. And I remember looking up, and there was black women, cleaners, who were looking at us, and they were waving to us. And then I was like, so it's really a luxury to be able to do politics in a space where black femme bodies are used to do the care. And interestingly enough, if you think about care, you know, as we did our research, as we searched for funds and whatnot, we realized that people didn't understand care because black women don't care for themselves, they care for other people. That was the function that we had within the context of white supremacy, within the context of coloniality, within the context of us being immigrants in Switzerland. If you see a black person in a position, it is usually if they're a cleaner or they're caretaking for somebody's grandpa, grandma. So for us to create Careology was to reclaim this power, this tool that is care for ourselves, and invite our communities or the people within our communities to come together, not only just to care, but to devise strategies where we could basically proselytize our institutions, our communities, our friends, our families into ensuring that we receive the care that we desired. So in order to do that, we had to do all of the work, because for us, the core of feminist work is care work. And I think within the context of feminisms or white feminism, it is work that is inferiorized, that is erased, even though it is the work that allows the world to be stabilized, allows the world to continue. So for us, it was beyond us, and I think 2 years into this work, we're realizing how impactful it is to create spaces where we can politicize around care, because most of the times we realized that the only moments as Afro-descendant people we were meeting was to react. We were going on strike after somebody gets killed. We were constantly meeting to politicize around our capacity to react, and never around our capacity to actually not only preserve, but to resource ourselves and to be able to go back into the world feeling grounded, clear about our objective, right? So for us, it's so super important to have also been able to meet Soñ Gweha, that gave us a tool, their piece, The Core. For some of the people who were with us during our workshop, you were able to see the small prototype. But for me, it was super important to work with them because it allowed us to connect our genealogies across Europe, because Switzerland is a very isolated country, I would say in the European context for Black folk. We don't exist. So it was super duper important for us to stretch our hands and expand the scope of work that we were doing, because our work is not only feminist, it's Pan-African, it's decolonial, and in order to do this work, we have to connect to as many practitioners in our close environment, but also use the system to basically be able to connect to other people that exist in our environment, to kind of like, again, fight against our political isolation. That's what, don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, hi everybody, my name is Paloma, and I do, yes, many things resonate, but I think it was a turning point for us to work with the core, because even before taking care of ourselves, we're not given necessarily the possibility to put words about what we are going through, especially in the context where we are all turned around to the United States, which has a language that have engaged our political engagement, but when it comes to Switzerland, it wasn't the case, and that's why I think it made sense for us to reunite in the context of Switzerland, but also collaborate with Soñ Gweha. So like actually put words on words that can define by us, for us, in our context, which is not the United States. Like we anchored our work through the erotic. It's important to have this erotic conversation as a blueprint that was offered by R.G. Lord, but how do we make sense out of that in the context of Europe, either in Vienna, Geneva, and whatnot. So I think it was, yeah, also really being able to have a container that allow us to speak about the trauma before we start the process of caring for each other. Yeah.
I just wanted to reconfigure what I was saying around the core. So the core is a piece that was created by Soñ Gweha. It is 9 cushion sculptures.
So there are different iterations. Some of them, there are 9, some 10, some 8. Actually, here is also the consultation. The core consultation is these sculptures here. This sound system is an abstract version of the core, but it started as cushion sculpture to gather people up. And it was inspired by a fruit I've been collaborating with that has different names. One of them is Safu, so it's in Lingala, language from Congo. And it is a fruit that keeps on teaching me a lot. And its seed, to me, is a metaphor for unification. So KitchenSProsper has been using one of those iterations I've been doing of the core. It's generally built collectively, because imagine these big cushions. To fill them with the foam, you must be 4 or 5 people. And so whenever I create those, the idea is for the communities, the collectives, artists, activists, community organizers to have access to those in order to support their own work, to support their restful moment, and to also anchor their practice, and hopefully it also can resonate with what you do. And I think.
Yeah, and that's something that really resonated, because it reactivated our genealogies, and we were able, within the context of the core, to take that moment, care intermission, take that pause to actually name our genealogies together, which we don't get to do in the spaces that we navigate as educators and whatnot. Yeah. Thank you.
We're shy.
Then I would just talk about you. So yeah, first of all, thank you for creating this space within this institution for us to gather and to spend time with each other. Also during the workshop, it was really powerful for me because I usually am outside of institutions. So it's rarely that I enter spaces in this form, and I really appreciate how you made it possible for us to gather here. And then, I don't know, I would like to talk maybe a little bit about We Take Space, and like how it was also informed by all the organizing that has been done by Araba, by Pamoja, by so many groups that organized before us, at the same time of us, parallel, crossing, like in so many ways, influenced also how my activism shaped in Vienna. And I'm really, I don't know how to say it, I feel like it's so rooted within like the work you have been doing for such a long time, and the collectiveness that has been present in Vienna for like, yeah, ever, basically. How you documented this history for us. Yeah, and for me it was really important to come together with other artists of color, with Black artists who live in this society and who didn't have a space to come together to exhibit. So I see myself as a curator of spaces, and I kind of had to take a break from organizing due to being burnt out by the storm, I would say. So today I also talked about how important it was for me to connect to like the calm space that is kind of within the storm, the eye of the storm, to really find my connection to this place on a daily basis. So to be able to be again within this kind of storming that happens around me, but to also become present again, storming myself, like to find the energy, the strength to build spaces and hold spaces for myself and others. So I'm really happy that, yeah, this is such a collective moment for me. I feel like so inspired, and I'm really happy to move forward, like to collective storming.
I think they're shy because because the way they sugarcoat their work, and also how much they manage to sort of split themselves, but at the same time making it possible to live in one body and one body of thought, working with intention and also integrity. I mean, it's always something you redefine, but when it comes to you, Nandi, can you tell us more about your own journey into creating space from, being a hairstylist and a makeup artist and a dramaturge, and how, because you are here within this moment, but we also had lots of discussion about this exhibition, as you are a dramaturge, so can you tell us more about, your own journey into storm work, really?
You brought all of my lives in here, like starting from being a baby, hairdresser and makeup artist and fashion stylist and all this. I feel like I moved through a lot of lives, and they kind of also inform how I want to show up now. So I really love to, I define myself, one of my alter egos is dramaturge, as you just said. So I love to kind of bring everything together, all of the experiences that I got to make in all these different areas, and kind of co-create experiences or remind, in my work with individuals, because I love to work with individuals as well as collectives. But with the one-on-one kind of sessions, I really love to remind each other of the intention. And Faris, who is not here today, is such an important person for me in my life. And also how they created this kind of quote that repeats in my mind, do nothing without intention. And to repeat it over and over again in all the situations, I think is such a, it was such a big learning moment for me. So I love to remind the artists or performers that I work with, like to connect to their intention and then to see if the impact matches this intention, and then to see how this intention could be translated into this institution, for example, or what has to be kept, you know, like more private, more secret, more protected. So I think, yeah.
We're going to talk about Ayurveda a bit later because, yes, I'm telling you, a lot of, lot of different hours. To go back to KitchenSProsper and Tanya, Ratwa, and Paloma. Paloma, you mentioned very, very quickly in passing that you are an educator. Can you tell us more about what it means for you and also where you storm work in this department? And this also goes for you, Tanya. Thank you.
So yeah, I've been an English teacher for the past 12 years, but I started as an academic until I was completely drained out of all my resources, because becoming an academic in literature also meant that I became a militant by default because of lack of representation. And so while I was, going through my journey within the context of academia, I started substituting. So it was not a vocation. I was really, into research and whatnot. And then when I actually reached out my breaking point after 10 years of academia, it was a long journey to stand back up for sure, but also me holding on to the work that I was doing with those kids became really, it became an emergency in the sense that not only was I nourished by the kids that I was working with, because I did not approach them as, I'm an authority, I'm just going to teach you how to live life, especially in the context where I'm teaching English, which is not the first language of Switzerland, and then again, also collaborating with kids coming from all around the world who didn't have the words, because English, whether it be English or French, it doesn't encompass whatever they navigate, go through, and experience as migrant kids. Because, yes, Geneva, there's many people coming from many different places. But I think my work as a teacher is really focused on the activation of the imagination. And so that's why I started a couple of years ago giving a writing workshop, because I do think that I'm not here to teach them how to be good employees. I'm here, because the way this thing is organized, but yeah. Activate the imagination and find their inner voice, as they allowed me to find back my inner child. Really give space, and like I said before, given the words, whether they be invented or not, but at least give that possibility to activate a myriad of lives. Because, like you said, I'm coming back for so many lives. I am too. And I want them to have a container, to go back to these moments of their lives, and also as a way to affirm whether they be identity and gender and whatnot. And so, even for me, literature is not only about the process of writing down on paper, it's really about activating the materiality of the voice. And so I did regulate some podcasts with my kids for them to yes, of course, to learn English, but not only, like really finding not necessarily a creative way of, capitalizing on whatever creative tools that they have, but just like stay grounded and always have the possibility to go back to this voice within them. So yeah.
We need more teachers like you. I mean, yes.
So I'm a social educator. It's a vocation that came to me. I didn't choose it. I feel like it was something that was given to me. And it's very important because when I chose to become a social educator is because I started to understand how the system of white supremacy kind of like reproduces itself in the family zone. So I started working in a group home about 5 years ago, and I started realizing that the kids that ended up in group homes were bizarrely always immigrants, always racialized, mostly from single-parented homes. And I started questioning myself, like, why is it always them? Why do they end up in prison? And I think that was the biggest realization that I had as an educator, is that I'm literally in a prison. I'm working with children who have been punished I'm working with children whose parents have been punished for not being able to be parents. And that for me was the most heartbreaking realization. And from then onwards, I realized that I was also working at an intersection where I had the choice to either embody white supremacy, to embody the system, to embody policing other bodies, or I also had the choice to actually free the kids. And I started realizing that most of my work, 90% of the time, was somatic. It had nothing to do with me educating the kids. It had everything to do with me incarnating and embodying the parent that their parent couldn't be. And a lot of my work had to do with allowing them to connect to their historical trauma. And that was so important for me to do this work, because it allowed them to see themselves not just as victims, but as people who were capable of acting on their future and for their future. Part of my work is really trying to allow educators to understand that we are tools of violence. For me, most of my work is allowing people to accept how we embody white supremacy, that it's not something that happened to us, it is something that happened through us, through our bodies. It's an encompassing system. It's not just something that is outside of us, it's within us, right? And so part of my work was really doing the work of politicizing education, because for me, it was one of the most depoliticized fields of work, when we're literally at the crux of, the fight. Not only just to fight for children to be able to navigate these spaces feeling empowered, but to be able to allow the full system to understand how society reproduces this violence. Because a lot of these kids end up in group homes because it's either a teacher, who tells on their parents and whatnot. So for me, it was very important not only to empower the parents who had their children who were imprisoned, but to use the system in very strategic ways to allow the kids to have the resources that they needed. Part of how I saw the system work, and I realized that's how the whole system worked, it was just that I was in a microcosm, is that racialized children were rarely seen as deserving of care. They were criminalized. Their reactions were criminalized. And for me, being in that position, having the power, and because I'm also a person who's very interested in somatic experiencing and body work and whatnot, having the authority to also tell the truth, I wouldn't say I was trying to save anybody, but what I was trying to do was to use my body as the first buffer zone, so the kids didn't have to take on the weight of the system. And I realized in order for me to do that, I had to be extremely consistent about the care I gave myself. And that there was no way I was going to be able to support these kids if I were not grounded and very rooted with the intention. And I remember always telling my colleagues, you're either the police or you're the one who's opening the police door. Choose. I'm not going to talk to you too much. You need to understand where you're positioned. And I used to tell the kids the same thing. Do you want me to be the police or do you want me to open the door? And this has followed me throughout every single space that I've been in, because I've seen how creating spaces to talk about the violence we have in ourselves is so liberating. And this is why I feel like as an educator, I am so moved by the power of the somatics, because I do believe that if we understand how much we uphold white supremacy every single day of our lives, we can also understand how to disarm it every single day of our lives. And it then creates a generative process that we can all activate with each other because we're able to name not the elephant in the room, but the elephant within ourselves, right? So that's the baseline of why I do believe that, again, my work as an educator is just one part, just foundational, but it really allowed me to just, again, transition now into a space where I want to become a body worker, where I want to work more one-on-one with people, but in the long run, work through creating maybe a pedagogy that centers the body in education. And that's for the future, inshallah.
So it's a space of telling, retelling, but also spelling desires. So
Yes.
Thank you for this one. First one of the night. Okay, it's important to honor that, you know. It's a manifestation, so thank you for sharing. You just talked about how your process is generative and regenerative, and that speaks to me dearly. And I was also very curious for you, Araba, how this regeneration happened throughout your own journey. You've been back to Vienna for about 6 months now, and we talked a lot about this. What is this time for you? So if you can share a little bit, that would be amazing. But before, let me introduce you. Because I think you deserve an introduction, come on, respect. So, Araba Evelyn Johnston-Arthur is a junior elder in decolonial untraining, recovering storyteller, and a time traveler in the process of re-arriving at a deeper understanding of Austrian presence, after having lived outside of Europe for more than 10 years now. I just want to pause on that, Junior elder in decolonial untraining. We're going to come back to that. Araba Evelyn Johnston-Arthur is co-founder of Pamoja, movement of the young African diaspora in Austria, and also co-founder of the research group of Black Austrian History. Her transdisciplinary work as activist, lecturer, community organizer, cultural worker, curator, public speaker in theory production, and multifaceted artistic interventions, has been crucially nourished by her living in Ghana, in the UK, and in the US. And it has been nourished as well by the art of collectives and collective processes of creation. At the moment, and hopefully you can tell us more about this, Araba's current work focuses on liberating arts of remembrance with a strong focus on the interconnectedness of the African diaspora in Austria. And I would love for us at some point during this discussion to talk about this remembrance and how it has shown up for us regarding Quiet Storm, even. Oh.
Yes, it's very hard speaking after all of you. I could have just continued listening. So I wanted to, when you asked me for a short bio, I wanted to start writing an undisciplined short bio. So with Recovering Storyteller, I wanted to make visible that I'm still figuring things out. Usually we present ourselves as, in a certain way, it impacts the voices we use when we describe our processes. So it's still scratching the surface, but a little bit, just a little bit. And the junior elder in decolonial untraining is a process that I feel I've graduated. They say that if the elders pass, then we kind of involuntarily kind of graduate. If we want it or not, we have to step up. And in my case, I hope my voice carries me through. in my case, it was the passing of my father that kind of changed the world for me and changed my place that I'm still finding. And if I wanted it or not, it was graduating to grow into shoes which I felt are still too big. And I'm training too because it's it's not something that we find, it's something we need to unlearn. It's something that you said it's within us, you know. So so it's really a process, and I feel I'm a baby of 6 months here, you know, and I also feel I'm not coming back because there's no back. Like the place is not the same. In some extent, I'm very happy about that. In many ways, I'm very impressed about so many presences. I'm so impressed about meeting you and your work. I'm so impressed about hearing your collect. I mean, so many things have been happening that give me chills, that were so yearned for when I left, because I didn't just leave on a sunny afternoon. So the storm, the blowing was also a necessity. I said I was a living room no, not a living room, the other way around, a furniture in a living room. But it was also after the activism and the fighting and the, you know, creating and the resisting, finding it hard to really find a space to make a living. And I don't think I would have been courageous to leave, even though I had to leave, or be blown away if I had found a job. Like seriously, I don't think I would have had the courage, but it was very necessary, and I'm very grateful for that. For that reality. But what I also wanted to say is that, and also to you, because you said inshallah, and you know, so I wanted to congratulate you as well to that already. And just also, this is a practice my father used to do, like when you tell him about a plan of a dream, as you have shared with us, he would say congratulations as if it already happened, right? So congratulations. Congratulations. So I'm in the process of figuring things out, and while I say I feel that you said it already, I've been so nourished by collective processes, you know, and even my voice, like just, I've been nourished also by my father's encouragement that my voice matters to be heard, you know. There's so many people speaking through me that have nourished me in so many ways. And it's an ongoing process. So when you talked about Pamoja means together, right? So it's strange to be here alone, but it's together. And I see Katya here too, who has been part of Pamoja. There's so many people that have made it what it was, and we're still in a process of remembrance. So I told you when I had the luxury of walking through, having, you know, you guiding me through the exhibition, the core has such an archive, such a knowledge. That is something I'm really interested in. How could that look like? How could that remembrance look like? And how could the circle of unmattering, of silencing be broken? Because that's basically the circle, and then I'm gonna land. I'm about to land. So when I was I started with remembering that there was a collective protest, just a few, just like next building or something like that. And this time of collective protest of the Black community was still a time where we felt this is the first time this is happening, because it was unthinkable that it had happened before. And I've told this story a lot of times, but I will keep, So luckily I bragged in front of my father and said, hey, we were the first ones, you know? Because that was the opening for him to correct me. To say, you know, no, actually in the 60s, people were there and protested. But it wasn't a story to be told and shared. I wouldn't have heard it if he wouldn't have had to correct me. So we didn't hear those stories, but the stories were present. So there was, you know, the absence was there. So that led me to, you know, to find that history, you know, to in the archives through, you know, through that memory. But I feel it's a circle of you know, that I'm very interested in looking into. Like, it's a collective question. Like, how does our architecture of memory look like? How could it look like? How do we remember? Because things are not lost. They never are. But there's a presence of the absence in a way. So being here in this exhibition, being here with all of you, is just, for me, in this process of a time traveler, is very, it's just the rightest place to be. So I'm I feel very honored that you invited me, and I'm also very grateful for Marissa for connecting us. And that is a very, that's such an important labor, the labor of love, you know. And yeah, so I'm just very, very grateful.
When you talk about remembrance, to me, I think about memory and how at some point I became obsessed with memory and transmission. I come from a tradition, multi-layered tradition, I guess. One is Afro-feminist circles in the 2010s in Paris, but another one is an African feminist independence fighter, which is my grandmother, you know. And when she died in 2015, when I stumbled upon her text, or one of her testimony that was published in a book, which is somewhere in there, I realized that memory can be somewhat graspable, you know, and that you have different types of archives in your hands. So I have literally a book, but there's also like memories, and memories carried through energy. And so the counter effect of that to me is also amnesia is an energy. Right? Erasure is an energy. And so what is then the materialization of that? Right? And how does it plays into our lives every day? This amnesia, this unlearning of what has happened. Sometimes there is these interruptions where our body breaks, and I guess, you know, it happens into a burnout, and then you start remembering again. Or maybe a memory triggered the burnout, you know. So in that process, working with archive, with sound particularly, with oils and textures, with gestures, it led me to sort of understanding my own journey into recognizing my indigeneity and where it's situated. And it is in the queerness of my ancestors. It is in their intelligence. It is in their knowledges. It is in their languages. It is in their in the way they walk, the way they swim. It is in that. But with that is also how I found my own way to walk, right? Through my own journey. But with that being said, I am also interested in where lands the archive of Pamoja, for instance. When you said that was it in 99 when the wake happening happened? When the wake happening happened?
1999.
So 99, Pamoja, yes, 1999, Pamoja organized this wake happening.
It was a whole, Pamoja was part of a collective, so it was called the Network of African Communities. Mm-hmm. So there were different, so for us it was important as Pamoja that this is a communal decision. So we negotiated with existing African organizations, and through that negotiation we we created the network of African communities that Pamoja was part of. But maybe another aspect is that this was a very short moment of intensive organizing, and when we just were in the warming up phase, we were silenced in grand style, and that was the
how so? Can you because I guess white supremacy and the police works into create ways to silence that are very specific, and when it comes to your organization and also yourself as an individual, if you feel comfortable enough sharing about how you were silenced, can you share that with us just so we can understand how to live with that and transform that in our own doings?
I was just frantically trying to look for a poem, but I'm not very good in multitasking. But I wanted to actually pull up a poem by Charles Ofoedo, who was part of the organizers and who was a poet that was imprisoned. So to answer your question, like the grand style of silencing was a grand style of silencing that's part of the dominant script, really. So it's not very unique. So our protest was silenced with what was then the biggest police raid in the Second Republic of Austria. And our entire protest was criminalized. Charles Ofoedo, who was a poet, he was constructed as a drug boss. He was imprisoned, and he wrote a book in prison called Morgengrauen that I took with me. And it's still a story that is yet to be collectively told. And to answer your question, how that impact, well, surveillance was very much part of this silencing as well. And it's hard for me to speak about it because I feel I've not been impacted as much because I was not imprisoned. But like you said, the somatic realities are still realities that force us to see how we still embody those things. So I think I'm in a space and place where I can speak, where I yearn to speak collectively and remember collectively how that is impacting the way I write, the way I, just the whole surveillance is such a violent act that it takes long to, to understand how it really impacted you. So I thank you for the question. I think it's still cooking. It's too raw for me to really, it's still cooking. I can't just, it's such a deep question. It's such an impactful, it's very impactful. And being also in connecting in the States to what I call my Maroon Village, I also realized how this is such a common story. How that's such a global reality in the struggle of racialized people, of Black people, but also racialized people, indigenous people. It's a very shared story. It's not unique in any way. So the longer I stayed, the more I understood the connectiveness and the power of connecting as well. Sorry? Exactly. Seeing the whole, so it's, and also to understand that everything is already there. It's just connecting to what is. It's not a read, and also, I think you spoke about the imagination, how things become unthinkable, we become so limited of what we deem possible and what we can create. So yeah, so that has really helped me in that sense to really, to really label on that.
When it comes to surveillance, or I guess what the institution implement, in one way you can have surveillance, but you also have sort of, I can say neglect, but it is like this crafted way to enforce labor, basically. And when it comes to you, KitchenSProsper, there was, this residency that you did in Nyon, where you work with one of my pieces, so the cushion sculpture we talked about earlier, the core. And come to find out, you had to work more. Can you explain, why?
Well, yeah, because Soñ Gweha gave a prototype of the Safu to an institutions that also, in the aftermath of the first realization, also gave access to the core, so communities could actually regenerate in the core, in the cushion where you are sitting now. It's another form, but sitting now, and it was very peculiar, especially when you think about the context in which, the core was giving to that institution, because it was an offering, with, so wholeheartedly given and provided and shared with community where you thought you had common ground. And gave to find out that we actually asked for the core once again, and it was actually, at this point, I want to say almost vandalized. Vandalized. And in the context of our residency, which was also open to the public, and given the, like I said, the importance of the work, it was impossible for us to just, put it in the middle of the room and have people to just sit on it and not address what was going on. And so, yes, it took time away from the residency, but it also actually helped us to realize the lack of care that we navigate in those curatorial spaces. And which is funny, because when you think about curation, is literally meaning like care for and consider what you might refer as an object, which is completely not. It's an entity in and of itself. And so we had to organize with our different communities of Tanya back in Nyon, because we were in Nyon, to restore the core. And so, yeah, it was just brought to light what it actually means to curate with artists that engage our genealogies in institutions that were not co-created or created for us, or to receive our bodies and to engage with our bodies collectively. And yeah, it was, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, and I think what was very peculiar, and I think Faris talked about it when we had our call, was, we have the same words, and we will say care, and we have this expectation that everybody understands. But I think this experience really just made us realize that it's not that people don't understand, it's that the world is divided by those who care and those who have the luxury of not having to care, basically. And I do think for us, we kind of realized that no matter how much we would have wanted to prevent this, we were in a clash of civilizations, literally. We were in a clash of cultures, we were in a clash of social abilities, because as Paloma said, we were so shocked to receive their piece in this state. We were like, are you not ashamed to give this piece and not even just clean it up a little bit? It was dirty, it was the sides were open, the mushy cushions were coming out. It was ridiculous. And And the reality of the situation is today, if we think about it, we still have not given back the peace. They still have not asked us for the peace. They haven't asked us for the peace. And so it poses this question of our vulnerability in these spaces, because I don't think we would have been having these conversations had we had our own environments to preserve our own things. And it speaks to the state that we experience as displaced people, that we're displaced bodies, that have the capacity to create, but where we are still limited by the fact that we don't have the resources to actually preserve, right, our art, which gives basically leeway to the culture of preservation. We're in a museum, right? And we cannot disassociate this history from colonization. We cannot disassociate the fact that the whole industry of museology was built on extracting the cultures, the bodies, the bones of racialized people. There's a whole economy that was created out of our objectification. So for us, it really hit home. But I do think there was something so beautiful about this experience as well, was that the community came to restore the core. So it basically created this beautiful, self-fulfilling circle, and not a vicious cycle, because the person who restored the core is a person I didn't know of. Basically, we connected to this person through an artist who was working in the museum, who called his friend, and he came, and he happened to be a person who was working in fields. He's in agriculture, and he did not hesitate for a second. He was like, I'm gonna do it. Of course. Even if it means I'm not gonna sleep that much, I will do it. Because he felt compelled to do it for our collective well-being. And then it really made me realize that it made me sad. It made me sad, and it made me super duper happy, because I questioned to myself, like, why is it that we have to continue doing the labor? But at the same time, I said, but if we don't do it, who is going to do it as well as us? And then it kind of like reminded me that care is a technology. It's not something that we are, right? And that's what whiteness wants to project upon us. And you were talking about this right before, where it's like strategic neglect. That's what you were saying, right? And I do think that whiteness organizes strategic neglect, right? And then it's going to innocent itself of like not knowing, not understanding, not comprehending. And I think, during our residency, we started working with the concept of the captive maternal that was theorized by a political philosopher of the name of Joy James. And the way they define the captive maternal is basically as a non-gendered individual, particularly of Afro descent, having experienced a historicity of enslavement or colonization. And they define the captive maternal as a function that was designed by white supremacy, designed to sustain the system, basically where racialized and colonized bodies are used to stabilize the system, meaning that we have been invented to nurture the system. And once we understood that, we didn't go back. We were like, So at the end of the day, this would have happened and another racialized person would have done it, right? Somebody would have taken care of it and it wouldn't have been them. So that means that your piece would have been completely destroyed until the end, would have been extracted from until the end, until somebody would interrupt that destruction. So, this is a long story, but it made me realize how important it is for us to then politicize care within the context of the institutions in which we're working with, because it's not that they don't know how to care, it's that they don't want to care. So it then made us question, so if you want to work for us, what are the protocols that you're going to put into place so we can continue doing the work that you need? Because we can exist without you, it's just that you've created an environment where we can't. But that's not the same for you. You need me, right? And so the core is such a beautiful, I always say it's it's like a spirit in itself. And so when it came to us, it's as if through the experience, because we didn't know we were going to have to do this. We were going to work on the captive maternal either way. But then when it arrived, we were like, oh, so we really the captive maternal. Okay, thank you, the core. This is the reality, right? We're not just theorizing. We're practicing, and it's affirming the theory, right? And so it allowed us to reclaim care as a practice that is so necessary to our self-preservation, to the preservation of our community, to the preservation of objects that have their own subjectivities. So yeah.
That's the spirit of my mom, by the way, because she sued this one. she participated in building this one. So that's the spirit of my mom. That means my mom was speaking like, respect me, respect my labor. Yes. And so people didn't respect. So now you became the one that had to literally work, into rebuilding it because they didn't. But thank you for that. To the bottom of my heart, already. I came, whatever. Yes. But thank you because it made me realize that in a way that I hadn't understood before, that spaces of care need to be taken care of and demand accountability and responsibility in a sense, right? So now it's part of my work to think beforehand and through the process of how to preserve, yes. Can we share? How to preserve the skin.
I just thought it's the right moment to maybe connect with the core and the whole story, because I actually had the pleasure, before I met you, to perform with the core. About a year ago in Mumok, another white institution, because of VBK and Vivencias, another people who are sitting here. So everything is kind of, because they invited Soñ, and then they invited us to perform in Mumok, and they knew what we're doing. We're like, hey, maybe this is a good connection. So the core really lives, and just like hearing like the story of what happened before to the core, somehow I could feel that while performing, and also in the communication around, okay, can we use or be part and make this artwork part of I performed with a colleague, of our performance, and how can we also honor the core within our performance. And it became like a space where I then told a story. I mean, basically like this, just speaking into a microphone, and I told a story. But I could feel a lot of energy that was given to me just through, the core. So, just short anecdote.
Can I say something a bit, not really unrelated, but kind of related? But, when you spoke about us as displaced bodies, and I don't remember in our pre-discussion, I mentioned that, and I don't want to forget that as well. A glimpse of the starting point of the research group of Black Austrian history was starting from the perspective what it means to be Black that was then 2005, how resistance looks like. I don't know if you remember, we also... Yeah, and we looked into the resistance of Josephine Soliman, who was a Black woman in the 18th century who had to resist against her father being exhibited, resist against her father being exhibited in the Emperor's Museum. So her resistance was to fight for the remains of her father to bury him. That was her resistance. And I shared with you too that when we were doing this research work, it was also, there was so much yearning to find this strong collective history where we all, we wanted to find something. We had a deep yearning. And there was a historian called Alsamare's last name, Laura Alsamare. We shared with her, Claudia Unterwege and myself, and what she reminded us was, even though that was, Josephine Solimann's resistance was not a collective resistance, but what she demonstrated was Eigensinn, and that's a German word that's not used as a compliment. If somebody calls you eigensinnig, it's not really a compliment, but if we dissect it, it's like sense of self. Really, it's resisting the violence of othering. It's resisting the violence of doesn't come out. Exoticization. Oh, it did. Exoticization.
That's the energy. That's how we feel.
Well, it brings luck. I mean, they say.
Curse is breaking. Yes. Tell the right story.
And I'm still landing at Niederösterreich with this too, because we found in the archives, thank you. In the archives we found the intervention that Josephine Soliman, when she basically addressed the Niederösterreichische Landesregierung, I don't know how to say that in English, Niederösterreich, Lower Austrian and Landesregierung, like local government of Lower Austria, in demanding her father's remains. And it's at the same time, again, a piece of a larger history, a piece of a collective history, a piece of a global history that connects, that comes again to the interconnectedness. And I'm thinking of the core, of the seeds, how all of this is connected as well, so yeah. So thank you for helping me to remember that again.
Thank you for sharing that. So to put that into context historically. I think there's also something that needs to be put into context in a sort of embodied way. And I think that Nandi, to talk about this, I would love to know more about how working with the body, working for the body, can sort of help us make a sense out of all of this, right? It's because you oftentimes makes the difference between soothing strategies and also self-care strategies that you can implement for the long run. Can you tell us more about how Ayurveda really helps you more first and foremost be present in your body?
You have deep questions for me tonight. I thought maybe now is a moment to bring Kuchi Faris also to the stage. Because we talked about the storm and how it could be us storming and us keeping blowing, but it could also mean like the storm that kind of keeps us in movement. And what they said was the storm keeps us constantly in movement, keeps you from processing, from taking a break. And I feel like that's us, like within institutions, like having to take another step. Okay, I just have to finish this one project and then I can rest. And then the end never comes. Like there's always a new deadline or a new show or like another emergency. The same in also in activist work. Like there's always urgency. There's always like this survival mode. We have to keep going. There's no way to stop. Like we are not even allowed to take a break because so many of us are suffering and like who are we to chill and like have joy and spend good times when other people are suffering. And I really lived this storm, and it really consumed me in ways that kept me from going. So, yeah. And I think, like, what I also love about how Faris puts like these huge concepts in like little cute sentences. They also talked about like the calm, and we talked about it as a space of intermission. Also connecting to the workshop that you invited me to take part of today, the intermission, the break, and Faris said the calm is like gives us time and space to process and to learn from our pain and to manifest it in a way that is nourishing for us. And it really speaks to me because I felt when I was kind of consumed by the storm, I was not able to see past pain, my own or others, and I really had to find kind of peace in moments of togetherness, like organizing together, meeting others, holding space together. And then I realized I'm not able to take care of others if I'm constantly barely holding on myself. Yeah, I think the calm really reminds us to breathe and that there's no rush, like that we can only see clearly when we are connected to this place. And this is what Ayurveda is for me, so it's bigger than me, as you can hear. And I feel like it's very important to connect to this space on a daily basis. And yeah, to see it as a practice that is lifelong, so it will never never end, and it will always be difficult to connect to this place, to anchor myself. Because of the storm will never stop blowing, like that's just a fact. But I also feel like to realize in moments like our workshop today, like that there is this moment of calm and that we can also co-create it intentionally, not only in our individual days, but also the times like we spend together.
I want to just add on to that, and thank you so much for reminding us about the importance of centering the body. The first thing that came to mind is that I think for a lot of racialized folks, we have a lot of survivor's guilt. We have the guilt of having survived. And one thing that, I love what you said about, you know, the word that you said in German that meant selfishness. It meant stubbornness, but that's the energy, right? And I think it's so political to talk about, for me, what the storm is. And you know, as I also did my own iteration of it, I said that the storm is like time travel. And I believe, and this is why for me, ancestral veneration is very important, because it gives me a contextualization of time, and we were talking about that before, you know. What allows me to keep going is that I realize that our ancestors have been trying to interrupt the apocalypse for 500 years. And I don't think we can imagine, like, on a physiological, somatic level, what that means, you know. What that means to have had to hold in so much rage. And I remember one of the most important definitions I ever realized was that depression is unexpressed rage. And I think about a lot of the times that a lot of us have depression because we did not have the ability to rage, to fully fight, because it's unsafe for us to fight wherever we are situated in, you know, in the context, whether it's in an institution outside. But that's why I think like coming back to the body is so political and so important. You know, Audre Lorde says, caring for myself is not indulgence. It is warfare. It is an act of self-preservation for a reason, that us being able to actually heal is a luxury. it is a luxury. And to have access to space and time to do so, for me, is such a beautiful gift of time that our ancestors gave to us. And I think this is one of the reasons why caring for me is so important to nurture, not only just individually, but collectively, because the goal obviously was to buy time. You know, I can speak to the context in which we're in. I don't even have to name it. We're activated, we know why. And to have to constantly see the ongoing wars that never finish, that are always continual, it forces me to kind of like reclaim my own temporality and my own time and remind myself like that all the work and all the fighting wasn't done in vain, and that if it was done, it was for me to be able to continue to storm, right? And to take these times to connect to the trauma vortex that is in ourselves, to basically disassociate ourselves from this external white supremacist vortex that distracts us from being able to tend to the wounds that are inscribed into our DNA, into our bodies. So yeah, thank you so much, Nandi, for reminding us, because Ayurveda is also your ancestrality, right? It's also something that you got to tap into and that you are used as a vessel to share with people. So thank you for allowing yourself to be moved by this praxis and to move this praxis through your body to continue supporting other people in preserving just enough to, not just to get by, but to continue to fight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for telling this much, for also sharing desires. I think we can open up this discussion with you all for a brief moment, or, you know, because we have other surprises. I mean, Mzamo is going to do a performance right after this, and then we can, you know, eat and go to sleep. But I guess we all would like to know more about the way you storm in your everyday life. I mean, and also how you embody the style, but also, you know, how it is to live in the storm for you. You know, I think it's something that is common to everyone here, because we all live in the same society. We just go through different experiences. But I mean, whiteness is present in the lives of every single one of us. So, you know, this question of embodying and living in is something, you know, that can be reflect upon, and that can be that can sort of open up doors and pathway for our imagination to be activated and our memory to be activated. So I'm gonna pass this one and maybe another one, and we can continue this maybe for 10 minutes or so.
Now it's in your hand.
No obligation, I mean, you know, no obligation.
So I was really moved about what you said about depression being like at the source of it is like this repressed anger. It's something that really resonates with me and my own life with depression, and it really. So at the beginning of I was here for the workshop, and the first kind of thing that we did together was Scream, which I thought was really awesome, but at the same time really scary, because I don't know if I'm not like a shy person, I'm not a quiet person, but still expressing anger and raising my voice intentionally with a purpose to release something is something that we are not taught. We are not taught how to be connected with ourselves, how to care for our
body, not only so that we can do it again tomorrow, but just so that we are okay in this very moment. And so I really, this screaming exercise really stuck with me for the whole day until now, because it really moved something in me that it's like when there's a little crack and then you shake it a little bit and it, yeah. I wanted to share that.
Hi, I'm Katja, and I started I like to say, my black political life through Araba, through Pamoja, and it's so, I also left Vienna for a few years, for 8 years before coming back, and I love that, you were talking about, it's not really coming back because the back doesn't exist anymore. And I think that through Pamoja and through the remembrance and the telling of stories that we did and that you did through Pamoja and through the research team, it helped shape Vienna, like the better Vienna that is now happening. And I can, like this summer, I redid this. So in 2006, I wasn't yet part of Pamoja, but the research group researched through the history of Black resistance in Vienna, which they called the decolonizing tour. And I had the honor of not only participating in the tour, but also actually learning and becoming a storyteller myself. And this summer, for the first time, I redid this tour with people from the ensemble, because we're suddenly a huge ensemble of Black people, of opera singers singing in Vienna. And it was always the idea that this tour was to tell our stories. And I wanted them to know, like, we've been here and it was so fascinating to redo this tour and see how much has changed through us, and like how many of these points are now just past and not present anymore. The last one being actually, I forgot the word that Josephine Soliman has been... Eigensinnig. So now a bit of Eigensinnigkeit, because it is like self-promotion, but I'm very, very proud of it. The first part of the tour started always at the Staatsoper, talking about the character of Monostatos, the Black character of the Zauberflöte, and the problematic of it, that it was still being blackface at the Staatsoper. And I'm an opera singer, and I'm singing at the Volksoper, which is in the same opera company as the Staatsoper. And last year, when I joined the ensemble, I said that for me it was just absolutely impossible that the children's version of the Zauberflöte still had the blackface Monostatos singing this terrible lyrics. And so now they changed it. And I'm like, so this is like the first point of the tour, and we have so many of those points that we've been, through our resistance, have been changed and have been like we changed the whole system, the whole institutions. And I'm so proud of myself, I'm so proud of us, I'm so proud of you, I'm so grateful for you opening my eyes and my horizons to being able to do those works. And yeah, that's it.
So maybe I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, it's so beautiful to see all of you here. And before coming here, I don't know why I was invited to talk about sorority. And I spoke about sorority, sororidade. That's actually a concept of a Black writer from Brazil, Vilma Piedade, that brings the connection through pain, sororidade, sorority. And actually, I was in a mostly white audience, and talking about that was impossible to have a connection to understand. I mean, and I was asking myself what I'm doing here, but I mean, and then is the concept of how it's important to come back to the pain and to think beyond of the pain, but disconnect us in a way, the narratives of pain. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful that actually that we acknowledge this pain. That's actually our technology of I mean, to go beyond of that. You know? So I was feeling a lot of pain there in this discussion, because I mean, I was trying to bring a connection that's actually the care. Like, it's so much work to do care. You know how much work we do to be like careful. You know, and all these vocabularies that actually care. And that context was totally lost, and how it's important to go back to the pain. And I feel very warm to be here. Thanks so much for, and seeing Araba, I have to say, because Araba is our, I mean, young elder. I mean, it's to see all of you, but Araba, because there is a historical connection too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, because you said it, and I just didn't say anything. I'm so moved. Thank you, Katja. And I also think that we also stood on the shoulders of people that we are yet to acknowledge as well, you know, and I think that's an ongoing process as well. But yeah, I can only say thank you, but it's more than that.
I was just thinking of something before, because you were talking about the quiet a lot in the storm, like the quiet spot in it. And then I was thinking that right now I do feel very quiet as well, but I don't feel the quiet in the storm. I feel like the calm before the storm, so to say. And I felt that was something, like, I feel it's coming, but I'm not in the calm part where I want to be, but in a different one, which is scary in a way, because it's unpredictable and it's like, I don't know where it leads or where I want to go. Yeah, that was just something that I felt like sharing.
I am a little bit unsure even if I want to share, but I decided I took the mic, so now I'm sharing. It's very interesting for me how triggered and touched I feel by listening to all of you. Yes, I'm crying. So it's just the whole thing of, yeah, the pain and the fighting and the caring, and the kind of unspoken things or unnoticed work that people do. A lot of Black people. And it's, yeah, I guess for me, it's very personal, and I'm also thinking, ooh, am I so like egocentric? But maybe also it's just part of the shared stories that we are experiencing. That, yeah, to just be in these like institutions, to have this conversation, even in this room, for me is like on so many levels, like, wow, how the fuck does this happen? And to have, yeah, people listening, and you know that they're listening over and over the past whatever. I mean, I've been active for the past 9 years in this art scene. So for the past 9 years, this is what I, could observe myself. And the same people enter the same spaces over these years, and it seems like there is such a huge division in the racialized people and the white people, and the understanding of what this care actually means. And yeah, talking about how the core got destroyed and stuff like this, like, for me, it's not even like, I'm not even surprised that this happened, but I'm sad that I'm not surprised that this is how, it's not that I expect it, but I expect it. And then you get, you know, these like broken pieces back, and you have to then repair them with your collective, with your family, with your, you know, support system. And then you look at who are these people again, and it's always the same kind of people. And it's just, in my observations, almost never a white person, almost never a white person in a power position. But it is still fancy to, you know, curate something around care. But then their own practice of actually caring is so neglected that it starts hurting in the embodied experience of being part of these spaces. Yeah, so I think I'm going to leave it here.
And I think you said something that is so important, because I always say, in order to neglect, you have to still touch to reject. That's what's violent. It's not just forgetting. It's like I have the power to care, and I don't. That's where the violence comes. It's not in not knowing, because I think that's why we talk about the fact that, you know, we've been in all these institutions. Everybody reads bell hooks, Audre Lorde, everybody is done an exhibition about it. We've seen it, but it just stays in theory and so disembodied. And I think what's very much powerless is that the reason why sometimes we feel powerless is because we know we can't intervene, because we don't have the power, because it's always about that. It's about who has the money and who doesn't have the money. And we end up in spaces where we know they don't have the tools to care, but we have to stay there because that's how we survive. But that's how racial capitalism functions. That's what comes back to what Joy James was saying with the captive maternal. You know, you're captive, and I need you. I need you to keep on nourishing me and my needs. I need you to keep on nourishing my comfort. And I think that's what is so violent, and I think for me that's where the somatics comes into play, where it's like we need to be able to talk about violence. That is there. So we don't have to fight. We don't have to just fight about it. It's here. So what do you do about it? And I think this is why, like, for me, incorporating care as a real process is so important, because it's not the conversation we're going to have after the math. It's a conversation that we have to have constantly when we're working, when we are reclaiming the time to say, boom, can we think about what's happening right now? Now then it asks us, do we have the courage to do that? Do we have the courage to actually take that risk? And how do we take that risk? And I think the work that we've been doing with Soñ Gweha made us realize that we can't take that risk by ourselves. That's the power of our politics. We come as in communion collectively, right? That's what allowed our ancestors to survive. It wasn't because it's because people were organized and talking, and they were sharing. In our culture, we say konkosa, which is like gossip. You know, like, your gossip has to be generative. And I think we've had all these conversations about neglect, but then how can we make the conversations about then care generative? And not just things we talk about because we feel like we have the authority to talk about them because we're racialized and whatnot. You know what I'm talking about? So, yeah, all I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, and the collective is so key, because we always speak in theory about what the erotic has allowed us, you know, find ways to connect to each other, but we never talk about how Audre Lorde died. Yeah. Okay, she was not even past 60, but mostly dying alone with her cancer because she had to ingest all that hate, all that trauma. So the collective is necessary, and we need to process together, because when it comes to me, even looking into queer theory, SXM field, the author that I've been working on for the past 10 years, he died alone of AIDS. But he was the voice of the people, but nobody was collectively organizing with around the attack that his body was undergoing. And so that's why, like, the collective again is key. Nobody talks about how she died, and she died, it's 16th of November, almost. Yeah.
I want to share that, like, I am so honored and privileged that I grew up in South Africa.
Come on.
And this gave me so much access to ancestral wisdom that living there, I never understood it, but the wiser, not the older I'm getting, the more things come into place. Because there's the word storm, and in this context, it feels like something that is vilified. And I remember as a kid, when lightning or thunder would happen, like people would like turn off the TV, you know, open the windows, close all the mirrors, sit down, don't do anything, sit still. So for me, how I understand the storm was about stillness. It was about stillness and led this cleansing to happen. It was fearful because also it was like, you know, but now when I think more about it, it was never about hurt, but it was about stillness and let nature take its course. I wanted to share this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Should not be afraid of the storm.
I mean, the storm is multifaceted, you know. Again, you know, there's the power structure that is, you know, bigger than us, whether we want it to be how it is or not. But it's also we, you know. So that's how, to me, you know, we storm. It's just how, it's a different house of it. I like to storm quietly, in a way, and even that is, you know, it has its undertones and its tonalities, and so. Okay. Okay.
We're digesting.
Well, I think we've said what we wanted to say. We can continue this with a glass of water or a tea or a beer. We have a bar here. I invite you to stay, linger there, keep gossiping, do some more kongosa. And then we will have an intervention by Mzamo Nondloana that just spoke here. And I just wanted to thank you, Tanya Radzwa, Araba, Paloma, and Nandi, Paris as well. Thank you so much for co-creating this exhibition with me, really. This show, but also this moment with everybody here. And thank you also to you all for coming and for interacting. I hope things will linger in the right way. We storm in your belly. Hopefully you don't have the bubble guts. And see you, okay? Okay. Thank you. Just so you know, it was filmed, so we will see all your faces. Voilà. Hey, please stay. There's like in 10 minutes or so, we'll have a moment of bliss curated by Vivencias.